I am Johnny Gutman, joined by Liam Kane, and we have an incredible main feature match. Liam, who will be seeing this round?
We'll be seeing two previous RC winners facing off. Joseph Cronny against Theo Jacques Griffin. This one is one to watch for sure. It's going to be Jeskai Blink against Simic Birthing Ritual. Two interesting decks that well, it's going to be quite interesting to see how they line up against each other. I really have no idea. I have not tested that matchup before, I must confess. But yeah, good players, good decks. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I just as I scroll through Melee and look at the standings, I'm seeing a lot of Simic Birthing Rituals near the top tables. This could be the kind of breakout or underrated, sneakily powerful deck of the tournament that really has a great showing. Jeskai Blink is the villain of the format. You got to think that if you're showing up to an event, you have to, with a kind of mid-rangey value pile like this, you have to think you have a good matchup here. And you'd assume the Simic Birthing Ritual contingent at least thinks that they have a strong matchup here.
Yeah, I've heard the whispers of the Simic Birthing Ritual being on the rise, and here it is out in force, and it's doing well. Um, yeah, my source says that Simic is feels usually a little ahead in the Jeskai Blink, but it's not so much of a knockout matchup. Mostly, it's a deck choice to beat up on decks that are really vulnerable to either free counter spells or Harbinger of the Tide. So that's what this deck specializes in. For those of you who don't know the Simic Birthing Ritual deck, we saw Birthing Ritual before, but here we play more 2-mana creatures, and we want to flip into Abhorrent Oculus with it as our way to win. But we use these cheap blue creatures like Icefang Codal, and we can sack them to Flare of Denial, or turn it into Harbinger of the Tides, which turns all non-basic lands into islands. So it's really good against decks where that free counter magic is good, or Harbinger is especially powerful.
And now,
Which is, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, no, shifting over to just Joseph's list for a second here. This is, Jeskai, we've seen it a million times, but there's a pretty interesting deck building decision with 3 copies of March of Otherworldly Light in the main deck, which you'd think is something that's kind of geared at targeting Urza Saga, but has the, hidden added benefit of giving this Jeskai Blink deck a way to interact with a Birthing Ritual that's hit the battlefield, which is not something that's easy to do that often.
Oh, that is going to be huge. Yeah, we'll see if that comes up, but I definitely expect it to.
Yeah, and you can see one in Joseph Karani's hand right now. This is, as Liam said earlier, these are two, former regional championships. We'll talk about this all weekend, but you'll see a lot of the same names that you recognize from events past rising to the top, and with good reason. These people play some incredible Magic. I'm excited to watch it.
And Theo revealing a Shardless Agent here, so we still do have that card in our version, as all of our free counter spells or cheap cards, the Force Negation and Flare of Denial both cost 3 mana. So Shardless Agent is not guaranteed to hit a Birthing Ritual like in the 4-color deck that we saw in a previous feature, but it is guaranteed to hit you something strong.
Yeah, this deck just, floods the board. You see how many decks are playing, cards like Ragavan and these 1/1 Coiling Oracles and Icefang Codals and, kind of little crappy little bodies can end up putting a lot of work in some of these matchups as defensive tools. And we can see it here with Theo having a Coiling Oracle on 2, just getting some pressure down. And Quantum Riddler Go is not, exactly the most powerful start for this Jeskai Blink deck, going full shields down.
You might not think, but maybe in this matchup, you just want to set up, draw cards, hit land drops, play slow. It could be vulnerable to a fast birthing ritual here if Theo had one, but I think it's not as bad maybe to be just warping Riddler onto, not as costly as otherwise might be. But yeah, as you said, flooding the board, we have 3 creatures in play for Theo on turn 3. Those are going to get some chip damage unless Joseph plays to the board right away.
Yeah, it looks like you can see what is likely going to be a Fable. A kind of added benefit is that Joseph this game has naturally drawn basic plains and basic mountain, which against the Harbinger of the Tides strategy of the Simic Birthing Ritual, he is kind of just naturally pretty insulated from getting got by this powerful 3-drop that sometimes you can get these hands where you're forced to fetch really awkwardly, or you just get got before you have the chance to develop your mana, and it can really lock you out of the game, even in a deck that plays blue cards. But here it's an issue that Joseph at least will not have to deal with.
And really interesting, you noted that there's a Fable in the hand for Joseph, but he chose not to play it, and he's going to go for Flage instead. You think, oh, Fable can discard Flage, but in fact, it would have eaten a Force of Negation had Fable been the line. So that's going to be maybe highly rewarded. Making sure that Flage gets down in the graveyard, threatening later. It has to be one of Jeskai's best cards in the matchup, as with many matchups, of course. And so that's a huge thing that Joseph has already got going for him.
Yeah, that is a really heads up play from Joseph Karani, and we're seeing these Coiling Oracles. They're hitting cards, but they're not hitting lands in order to give Theo this huge mana advantage. The cards are still fantastic, but they haven't been able to convert to anything right now. He clearly has a bunch of interaction in hand, which is obviously, an excellent place to be, but there hasn't been that haymaker play of a birthing ritual or an important oculus, or one of these very strong cards.
Did you call a Fibblethip a fantastic Magic card?
No, I said it had not drawn the fantastic magic. I would describe Fibblethip as one of the least fantastic magic cards. But Theo has gotten 4 of a kind Coiling Oracles. I'm not sure the side bonus you get from that, but the damage is racking up, and Joseph is going to be forced to do something. And again, the discipline of holding that Fable is very commendable here.
Yeah, he knows that there's a birthing ritual was revealed, and so he's definitely not going to go shields down on this turn. But it's hard not to ever go shields down when you're getting attacked for 4 over and over. Although the Flage life gain and knowing that Flage is going to come down eventually makes him probably quite comfortable taking a decent amount of damage here for sure.
Yeah, this is kind of, awareness of the matchup. Joseph understands how these games go, and the real punish of jamming something like a Fable on turn 3 into potentials. But that Force of Negation has another mode. You can just tap 3 mana, and that is a birthing ritual that has hit the board, even with the March of Otherworldly Life being drawn by Joseph.
I didn't see an Abhorrent Oculus, but I did see a Fibblethip, so that, well, being an incredible Magic card here and drawing 2 cards for Theo.
It does read a lot better when it draws 2 on ETB, that's for sure. And this position from Theo is just going to continue, and that
It's over.
is...
Wow. Game 1, I mean, Joseph knows this match could go quite long, and he wasn't winning that one, so packs it in. Game 1 going to Theo with Simic Ritual.
It didn't seem like Theo, really had to do much. It felt like maybe the onus is a bit on Joseph to make something happen, because if just Theo can sit there casting 1/1s that draw a card, that's really all it needs. And that game 1 did not feel inspiring. Hopefully these mystical disputes and more March of Otherworldly Lights are gonna provide some respite for Joseph in the post board games.
Do you think he'll go for the Wrath of the Skies as well?
It's possible. I would guess no. I would the way that I feel about this matchup just from watching those games is that Joseph is sort of the aggressor and needs to punish Theo for playing, you know, I'll call Fibblethip what it is, an underpowered modern quality Magic card, and I think trying to wrath up a board of Coiling Oracles is not the approach, and getting to that 4 mana to deal with a Birthing Ritual seems to be a bit too difficult. But maybe
Yeah.
that's a thing that comes in. There are definitely some cards you want to cut here.
Well, Ragavan could be weak against all this deck full of 1/1s, but if you want to make something happen early on the play, I mean, that's the type of card that does that. Now, Wrath of the Skies is the only type of card that could easily bring you back from Birthing Ritual hitting a Port Oculus. But again, unless you have that Galvanic Discharge to produce energy, that's going to set you back 5 mana, which might be far too slow. And such an expensive sweeper is, especially at a sorcery, is very vulnerable to Theo's free counter magic of Flare of Denial and Force of Negation.
Yeah, I think we felt it a little bit in that game one where Fable is this incredibly powerful card. At the end of the day, it's a non-creature sorcery that costs 3 mana. You don't get a lot of spots to cast that one. And Theo's just, I'd like to just pay some attention. I don't know how Theo would board here, but this is one of the most beautiful sideboards I've ever seen. One of Propaganda, 3 Gemstone Caverns, the 1 Neoform to really turbo out that Harbinger maybe in a matchup where it's important. Some Quantum Riddlers for the grindy matchups. This sideboard's got it all. This is a work of art.
This is beautiful. This is recognizing, hey, we're playing modern here, and I have a bunch of 2 mana 1/1s in my deck. If I'm going second, I need a card like Gemstone Cavern so that I can start doing what my deck wants to do faster. So yeah, I love to see the way he's built it, and 3 Mystical Disputes for each, so about parity for both players. They're both going to be excellent on both sides. Now, Joseph's probably a little bit stronger. Because a dispute can't hit a March of Otherworldly Light, but yeah, a little bit about even there. So I feel like in terms of who's favored, it won't be changing too much, but the dynamic of the game, the way it plays out, will probably change a lot. We'll see.
Yeah, we talked about the play draw shift could be massive, right? There's these Gemstone Caverns from Theo on the draw. There's also just the nature of maybe Ragavan is a card that's, central to Joseph's on the play plan, but maybe that Wrath of the Skies controlling posture is something that you're kind of required to do when you're on the draw. But then there's that whole possibility that you have a sideboard plan for being on the play, and your opponent opens with the Gemstone Caverns in their hand, and you don't feel like you're on the play anymore, that's for sure.
And we're going to take a jump into our backup feature match. We have Brady Kiesling playing Izzet Affinity against Asha Mills Emmett on Jeskai Blink. A bird token in play for Brady, which means he had an important spell countered by a Strict Serenade. Flage in the graveyard. Life total's unclear. This is anyone's game here.
You got to think this is a matchup that the longer it goes is probably leaning to a little bit better for Asha. A lot of more expensive cards. This affinity deck sometimes feels like it's just about dumping your hand onto the board and praying, but it does have a lot of staying power. And this Pinnacle Emissary, there's card draw spells. But looks like only a couple of cards in hand for Brady, but not many more for Asha.
Whoa, where are we in the turn? Tormod's Crypt, draw step. Okay, that makes sense. I was about to say so many cards in the graveyard spotted the Tormod's Crypt in play. Brady, of course, waiting till the last moment to use the Tormod's Crypt as Flage or with Arena of Glory would have probably spelled Doom, but able to answer, one of the most dominating cards in Modern right now, just with a 0 mana artifact that already is contributing to his game plan. That's some of the power of the Izzet Affinity deck. Is you play all these, weak, useless artifacts, but then when they come up, they really change the game.
Yeah, there's Tormod's Crypt, there's the engineered explosives, which is kind of blown up on the scene, especially combined with weapons manufacturing. We're seeing another couple of copies of No More Lies in Asher Mills Emmett's hand. That means they are clearly, from that kind of Fournier school of thought of how this Jeskai deck needs to be built. Maybe that kind of slower posturing position for these kind of longer, grindier games is how they view the deck.
Yeah, and we do have a treasure token available to cast that No More Lies if it comes to that.
And it doesn't seem like Brady has
A Metallic Rebuke, potentially?
Perhaps.
No, just the Memnite being saved by the bounce of the Aether Spellbomb.
Wow, that is a play that you will not see often. Memnite being returned back to hand with a Pinnacle Emissary in the Warp Zone. It makes sense. Asha now is kind of an interesting decision. They can choose to cast this Pinnacle Emissary, but shows it puts them down. They're too normalized, can't cast either of them. But the other problem is if they choose not to cast it, it's Brady's sick warning signs got to be going off. They must know something is up. They had the option to cast a free 3-drop and chose not to. There's got to be some instance in hand.
Yeah. All right. As that game, game one going grindy in that matchup is quite something. But we're gonna jump back into the start of game two of our main feature match. Theo go on the draw, no Gemstone Caverns. We don't know if he brought them in or not. Just a Hedge Maze being tapped on turn two, facing down 2 open mana, an Arena of Glory, and is that a Sacred Foundry, I believe? So no blue mana being represented by Joseph.
Yeah, if that's the case, does narrow down the possibilities of what could be cast in this end step. Potentially a Felly. I see a March of Otherworldly Light, Teferi, Quantum Riddler.
It could have been turn one Arena tapped into Shock, Hollowed Fountain, but I think looking at that art closer, it's hard to tell with the alt art, but I believe it's a Sacred Foundry, and that would track with Joseph being at 20. So yeah, no blue mana in play for him, and I see a lot of blue cards in hand.
And that is not where you want to be. And if you're Joseph Karani, that is a bad way to get kind of run over in a matchup where you see that, yeah, it's a quote unquote grindy matchup, but you need to have, your finger on the pulse of things. Otherwise, the game will get out of hand very quickly. If one turn of Birthing Ritual not being answered is almost feels like it's enough to really, really put him in a tough spot. So now he's really got to get a blue source in the next couple of draws, or this game is going to spiral quickly.
Yeah, we see a Coiling Oracle got binned off of the Surveil, so we know he at least has more of where that came from. So
Yeah,
that could be set up as soon as next turn. And oh, it was just a fetch land. So that makes sense. Arena of Glory played on turn one into turn two fetch land. So there's no mana worries for Joseph. All that happened was he had to take turn one off for a tapped Arena of Glory. But that him choosing that sequencing did mean that he didn't there's unlikely to be a red source already in hand. Otherwise, he could have led off the red and played the arena later. So,
turn one
but
Arena
at
Glory does
least,
feel like a land light decision. I would agree there.
yeah, yeah. But land light, I mean, that could get changed real quick if we warp a Quantum Riddler and then get to draw 2 cards off of it and the Philia Flicker, if that all just goes through.
Does look like there's a Flare of Denial in Theo's hand, so Joseph's kind of expects some level of interaction to be there, and he's deciding what spell he wants to get countered / which spell's the most dominant if it resolves. See 2 Riddlers, I would guess that means one of them's going to come down.
Yeah, that would make sense. Now, it's different than in other matchup. We saw in previous matches where players would pass to play around the counterspells and wait for the right moment to jam into the counterspell. But specifically against the Simic Birthing Ritual, you want to cast your important spell uh, as soon as possible, because now that that Coiling Oracle is in the graveyard, you're safe from Birthing Ritual on this next turn. If Birthing Ritual comes down, there'll be no creature. So moving that off the board is almost just as valuable as getting your spell to resolve in terms of tempo and turns.
Yeah, this is kind of more what you'd imagine you'd want the games to look like from Joseph's side, applying some pressure with the Felia. Theo's, instead of just getting to develop things freely, is forced to be the reactive player and is taking this chip damage. And Joseph is threatening the ability of just slam a Quantum Riddler, and that is no third land drop from Theo, which is puts him in a pretty tough spot.
Oh, that's difficult to recover from. I
You can
think
see the interesting spot with a Coiling Oracle in hand, chose not to just cast it in the main phase looking for a land, possibly wants to represent some more cards.
yeah, that is interesting. I mean, it could be for Dismember on the Philia. I don't know if you got a better peek at his hand. It could be he's going for Ice Fang Codal instead, although with not enough snow to give it Death Touch, it wouldn't be too much different from a Coiling Oracle. but it's
This,
just ensuring that an Ice Fang resolves against a potential mystical dispute. So yeah, smart play from him.
yeah, very heads up, realizing it's okay to miss a land drop, just need this creature resolve, and Mystical Dispute is just such a blow. It knows Joseph has three of them, but it does feel like another spell is just going to hit the stack and deal with a creature, and this Felly is going to continue trucking.
Yeah, and choosing to go for the Flage over the Quantum Riddler at this point, we want to guarantee that the creature is getting off the board and not allow the Flare to have another good target. So, and get that Flage in the bin set up. So similar play as Joseph made last time, but now he's much better spot on board for it to work out in his favor.
Yeah, this Felia is, not getting a ton of value, but is constantly a huge threat and is putting a lot of pressure. Can see that Theo drew back-to-back lands and maybe a little bit of a punish there by the choice of going with that end step Quelling Oracle. Playing around the dispute, very heads up, but in this spot is against Joseph not having it, unable to make these land drops, and
Yeah.
that could put him just even further behind, even though Joseph's also missed the fourth land drop, so maybe the mana troubles don't feel as bad in comparison.
And we see similarly again, no Coiling Oracle coming down. That's going to wait. Joseph has a Teferi, another Flage, I believe a Strix Serenade, and a Wrath of the Skies, or is it a March in hand? So full
I
of
think it's a
action from there.
March. Yeah, that's a lot of powerful cards.
Yeah. As often happens when a player misses land drops, it means, uh-oh, they must have a lot of gas.
And both players do, but as Theo's life just falls lower and lower, Flages in the yard looming. We might see some spell get hard cast Flare of Denial as an answer. The secret cancel mode, this Teferi, this is a must answer. This is not a card
Yeah.
that you can allow resolve under any circumstance.
No, I agree, and we might be likely to see that flare come down right now. I wonder if there's an Ice Fang if we choose to cycle it by playing it and then sacrificing it, or if we value it enough to just tap 3 for the cancel.
Yeah, these are choices. Theo's got a subtlety in hand, maybe wanting to go for kind of a less card advantage preservation play and a more tempo play of maybe going for that subtlety and then flashing in that coiling or that
Oh,
Ice Fang Podal at end step.
and I thought I saw a flare in his hand, but I believe it's actually a sink into stupor, and that removes a great option for him. Yeah, I think that is a sink, not a flare. When sink onto
I
fairy
think
is so much
that's got to be
weaker.
a flare, that front right
Really?
card. But
Okay,
we
well, he
shall see that.
chooses
Yeah, that was Flare
subtlety
of
pitch
Denial
flare.
exiled.
Oh,
There you
wow.
go.
Okay. Both both MH3 cards, both kind of similar art, a little figure surrounded by blue.
Same mana cost. And this is a very heads up play from Theo. I kind of like this because this Teferi is incredibly threatening, but you know your opponent's missing land drops. This is not a
Yeah,
card they can afford to put on the top of the library. This has got to go to the bottom.
you would imagine so with the Flage in the graveyard, but also, I mean, what is Theo? I can imagine what Theo's next turn might be, and Teferi sounds good against anything he could be doing, right?
Yeah, it's tough. You got to know that Theo's going to do something proactive with the last three mana. Maybe he's threatening, and a hard cast Endurance could scare Joseph out of attacking.
I think I spotted a green card in his hand, so I think it is the Endurance. Also, Endurance, of course, tucking the Flage as well would just be a huge game changer. Even if Joseph doesn't attack into it, it means he's completely stabilized on the board, has a creature, can go Birthing Ritual, and Flage is now, you know, no longer much of a worry. So Theo, with this play, with the subtlety, choosing not to cancel the Teferi, might have turned the game around quite a bit for
Let's see if
himself.
that's an.
It is.
Yeah, but looks like heads up play from Joseph going with the no attack, realizing what's up, and it's not the best spot in the world, but it's a heck of a lot better than if that Endurance was ate the Felia.
And the Endurance getting in, so we're saying no fear of Felia or damage. We Theo wants to, start his own clock, start chipping in himself.
And that
And
it's because he's expecting to get rid of this Endurance. Down to 7 though.
2 birthing rituals. Okay, so he's now a very good chance at finding an abhorrent Oculus.
Yeah, the odds are excellent, and maybe even the dream of getting a cycler into an Oculus
Yeah,
would be ideal.
that's why he attacked. So I think if Theo is thinking, because if you miss on Oculus, you've downgraded your endurance into an Ice Fang, which perhaps the body is not worth the card in his judgment. But if he knows that he's going to go for this line regardless to try and get an extra card if he finds Oculus on the second trigger, then that attack makes a lot of sense.
Not look like
But
there's an important Oculus in those. That looks like a shardless agent might be the best choice.
I mean, it does trade with Ophelia or forces the Ophelia to blink it, but that is definitely not what he was looking for there. And we can see with the time spent on the decision that he's not, not hit his best possible off of this
That
wizard
is not
carry.
pretty.
No, a
And now
2/2.
Joseph has a bit of a window of at least being able to get Theo down to 2, could blink this shardless agent and send a Flage upstairs. He's got options.
Going to choose to try to establish a Quantum Riddler, but that would result in trading off of the Ophelia, um, saving
That
the
that
Flage
could be
for.
something he's okay with. In the face of these two birthing rituals, a shardless agent can represent. You know that the bottom 14 cards of the library don't contain an Horn Oculus. The next 14 have a good chance of involving one.
That's true. That's true. And Theo, depending on his hand, could choose not to block if he thinks he doesn't have any creature, but that is quite a risky proposition because even if you find the Oculus, the Philia would be able to remove it for the next combat. So I expect him to make the block, try and trade off, but no, he does take it because he isn't sure that he will have a creature.
And we can see it looks like I believe Theo is showing a Horn Oculus and a Quantum Riddler in hand. So kind of an interesting no block. I'm surprised there, but
I
Theo's got to
guess
have
he's
a
trying to get
reason.
double Oculus. What's better than one Oculus is two.
You're not wrong there. And that looks like a hedge maze drawn, which makes this play look pretty appealing. Because now we get to
Unfortunately,
get some
not an
sacks.
untapped land, as we would prefer to also warp the Riddler, draw 2 cards, and then turn it into another creature. But um, he'll be happy just to try and establish at the very least one Oculus. Oh, and he will be going for the Riddler line, saying, I will find what I need off these birthing ritual triggers. I want to draw more cards right now, which, makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. There's an interesting position here for Joseph. We're seeing two March of Otherworldly Lights and an Ether Gust in hand, so a lot of potential targets for these removal spells. Are you supposed to go after the creatures? Are you supposed to go after the birthing ritual? Doesn't
I'm
look like there's enough white cards to pitch. If there doesn't seem like there's a fourth white card after the Flage, you can't go for the March pitch kill a birthing ritual, March pitch kill a birthing ritual.
But is it
Got
enough that if
options.
if one Oculus is hit, you can March pitch kill the Oculus? It should be, yeah, one white card.
Yeah, that is definitely enough. You can kill the Oculus, and it does look relatively close to Joseph finding a way to squeeze out lethal with a Flage in hand. Feels like Theo needs something, but he's going
Ooh,
for
he's
it.
going for March on the birthing ritual. I didn't expect that. I think with his board, he would be most concerned about quantity of creatures. The double ritual and 2 creatures, he would be more concerned about the quantity of creatures rather than exactly which one they are if he can remove one Oculus afterwards. But he's choosing to try and deny getting that Oculus in the first place because if Theo does not find an Oculus, then it's over immediately. So denying
Yeah,
a 7 looks at an Oculus and potentially denying a second Oculus depending on how the hits go. I like the way
it
Theo
feels
does
like
it. He
Theo
just
did
picks
not
out
see
6
it.
and then flips the 7th afterwards every time.
But it
But no
does not look
Oculus
like Theo's
again.
system has been working with no Oculus. You see now 21 cards. We know there's one Oculus in hand. maybe it's a card that gets trimmed post board, but you can't. It'd be tough to imagine that. It just seems like some really unfortunate
I could
rips
see
here.
potentially playing against a Solitude deck where you don't want to have so many, but if that is his plan, it's costing him here, and Joseph getting rewarded for trying to deny the birthing ritual as his first one did miss or miss. It hits a Fibblethip, draw 2 cards, but 2 cards looking less impressive this game than it did last.
Joseph did make the choice to get rid of the Flage instead of the second copy of March, which means that the Riddler plus the Flage out of lethal is not an option, but
Yeah,
still.
a reasonable hedge, because then if you keep 1 March, if Theo does hit an Oculus, it's not game over. You can still remove it, but definitely going to cost him here, as I think he would rather have the Flage at this point, given what Theo did hit. But yeah, so take the middle ground of try and deny double Oculus, but still be okay if they hit 1 with your line. So yeah.
In the world that Theo has no instant speed plays, it is still lethal from Joseph, but it does seem tough to want to go for that against the deck of almost entirely instant speed plays that had just drawn up a
Yeah,
fresh set of
exactly.
cards. I would feel too nervous trying to go for something like March the Fibblethip and Blink the Shardless Agent. That just seems like a recipe for disaster. Might just be the safe play. Go after the Shardless Agent, attack with both, try to get a chump block out of the Fibblethip, and get a March on the Birthing Ritual. Feels like putting you into a spot where you have a pretty tough time finding a loss from there.
Yeah, I think Joseph exactly might not be concerned about lethal, as if he removes a second birthing ritual, the game can go, 5, 10 more turns, but no birthing ritual, he doesn't feel threatened at all.
Yeah, it's just he's taking his time, looking at the spots, trying to figure out the best thing. It doesn't appear that Theo has anything in instant speed, but it just feels like the odds that he has one are so likely. I wonder where this Felly is going at. It's got to go for the Charles agent, you'd
Yeah,
assume.
Theo asking, okay, you declared attacks, where's it going? It's
It
going
doesn't
up.
seem like he went after anything, which I guess doesn't change much, really. Like the Fibblethip is always going to block anyways, but
Yeah, maybe he was trying to bait Theo into a double block on the Felia, but yeah, Theo avoiding that scenario, going to 1 and trying to go for another look with his birthing ritual this time. And at the very least, he can cast the Port Oculus that's been in his hand. So he's actually, in an okay spot still. I believe with a flare in hand, or is that a sink? That's a flare.
I believe it's a flare. And here, yeah, Theo's got some options. The all important third Snowland has hit the battlefield, so the future uh
Ice Fangs?
Coatls, yeah, we'll at least be able to trade off with this Riddler and maybe stabilize. But yeah, Theo maybe a second Riddler in hand, if that's what that is, or a
He's,
second Oculus.
yeah, he still
Guess
needs
not.
Theo in hand, flare, land, yeah. Uh, March being cast on the birthing ritual. The Oculus is okay for Joseph because he knows the Felia will be able to flicker it.
Yeah, it's looking tough for Theo here with the Riddler getting rid of, able to get rid of a flying block. You might have to let this go and try to hope to be able to at least endurance and chump block
Yeah,
the Oculus.
is that a oh, the Ether Gust that you mentioned before? Ether Gust on Shardless Agent. Oh, I can't say I've seen
That's
that interaction of cards before.
I think that is a line that mostly happens with people who are unfamiliar with the Cascade mechanic, but here it's just trying to draw a second card with the Riddler,
Yeah.
and that is a Oculus flipped,
Oh,
and
wow.
a, a little bit cheapish as you put the incredibly good Ice Fang Coatl into the yard.
Yeah, that one is like Joseph immediately knows that one is at least as good as an Ice Fang, which means it's either another Ice Fang or an Oculus.
does seem unlikely that Joseph would want to flicker that one in the hopes of it being a spell of some sorts. That seems out of the question here. But
No,
it does
although
seem like a galvanic discharge was picked up, which might be able to create something with along with the Ragavan.
wait, Joseph has a Ragavan?
Maybe, maybe I see a red card. Looks like a Ragavan.
Oh. Oh, I've been
That
focused on Theo's side. I
well,
right, so you drew
Joseph drew
two
two
two new
cards.
cards,
The Ether
two new
Gust,
cards this
yeah.
turn, of course.
So it looks like it might be Galvanic Discharge Ragavan, which it asks a lot of questions of Theo. If that's what the last couple of cards are.
Yeah. A quick little judge call going on right now. That's the reason for the pause. Um, perhaps clarifying about how discharge works against manifest. When you manifest, it flips it up. Sorry, when you want to flip up your manifest, it's like morph. It just happens immediately. There's no ability for Joseph to respond to flipping up the manifest with that galvanic discharge.
Here, it does seem like this is going to be lethal for Joseph Karani with just enough creatures, and the Felia is going to get rid of a blocker, and the Ragavan is required to get blocked, and the Discharge is going to probably eat this Oculus because some mana is going to have to get tapped. Feels like it's got to be a lethal attack here.
Yeah, it's falling apart now for Theo. I mean, not that he was in a good spot before, but it might be the end of it.
Yeah, unless there's some Theo does keep his cards pretty close to his chest, so it's
Yeah.
hard to see what he's got. Maybe some subtleties or force of negation, because the free spell and flare of denial is it's not exactly what you want to do when the only
No.
creature you can sacrifice is an important Oculus.
And Joseph taking his time to plan out the lethal as any good player should. You never want to rush into it and realize that you messed it up while you're in combat and no longer can take a play back.
But it does feel like beyond just dashing this Ragavan and moving to combat. Doesn't feel
Yeah,
like
and
there's too many choices, and
too many.
Theo's
Yeah.
got to realize that
Totally.
this is not looking good.
Yeah, perhaps. What could save a consign on the Felia trigger and then a Ice Fang being cast could save Theo here. Now this is extremely or not too likely to be in his deck or hand, but
Yeah, it's got to be this Felia is just too many things, and
yeah.
even this is going to be probably lethal even without the galvanic discharge.
Yes.
And now you have to contend with that as well. Does not look like a great chances for
Uh,
the Quebecois Theo, but we shall see. Flare of
Endurance,
denial,
Flare,
not a spell being put on the stack, unfortunately.
anything that needs to tap 3 mana for is not enough on its own. It needs to be that plus something else. So
And with how kind of long and complex this second game has gone, you gotta give some kudos to Joseph for scooping it up very quickly in the first one.
oh,
'Cause
that's true.
this is
Conceded with 45 minutes on the time, and they're down to 18 now. So yeah,
that
heads up
shows
from
this
him.
that's someone who's played the matchup before, right? It's a complicated matchup with a lot going on, and he realizes that and scoops it up early to buy both of them some more thinking time down the road. But this looks to be the end of game two, even without the galvanic discharge. Perhaps we might have the
Life
wrong
totals,
life totals.
maybe.
No,
That's
never
because
mind.
otherwise, I don't feel like this wouldn't have taken so long with Theo at 1. But
Yeah,
who
perhaps Theo
knows?
was just a bit higher.
Uh, All right, well, we'll
Do,
move to game 3 in this match, and it didn't look like Theo had brought in any gemstone in this matchup, as it makes sense, Grindy, but they would come back out for game 3 with him going first.
yeah, we saw the Ragavans from Joseph. It was kind of instrumental in the lethal. Maybe that's something that doesn't look to be a huge part of the game three strategy on the draw. See if we can get a glance of what if there's any changes, but it
Yeah,
doesn't really look like it from the way things were going. back
Right.
to this match between Asha and Brady. Ash on the draw, possibly this. We saw game one go pretty
Game one
long.
was
This could
long.
this
This could
this
be
could
two
be
or
game
three.
three. It could be game two.
Yeah. Now, something to note is that we see Asha with Ragavan in their deck, and that one is, if you actually look at how the affinity deck is constructed, it's actually quite strong against them, even though you think, oh, make so many bodies, but getting that mana as fast as possible, and other than Memnite, there's not too many good ways to block it super early, so I like that one's still in their deck.
Yeah, for a good example of that be the Pinnacle Emissary drones can only block creatures with flying. Doesn't stop
Yep.
Ragavan. Ornithopter doesn't really stop Ragavan well. So it's a heads up decision. That's kind of especially the shifts from the decks away from playing. Maybe the full suite of Memnite. This could be a list that's gone down a few copies. This one is not. Brady's playing the full four, but there's definitely been some shifts there.
Yeah, and we see a bit of a weak start from Brady of just the Warp Pinnacle Emissary cast one single Mox Opal, but that could be setting up the like it could still be quite a strong follow-up if he just needed to get those first few artifacts to turn on the Opal if he had, say, a second Emissary. But as it goes, he just taps 3, puts the Emissary back into play. Almost looked like he was going to pass the turn, but still thinking, it seems, after resolving the Pinnacle Emissary. Or perhaps the Pinnacle Emissary is on the stack, although I thought Ash had indicated it resolved. Yeah, so the turn was passed, and then Solitude being cast going after the Pinnacle Emissary, pitching Supreme Verdict, which is a card you'd imagine is quite valuable in the matchup, but not here, not with a Ragavan in play versus this board. Supreme Verdict getting pitched away.
And that is not the best looking metallic rebuke, is it's getting effectively exchanged for a treasure. And Brady's left with, I believe, a Force of Negation and one other card,
Wow,
which
yeah,
is
just
not.
pay.
That is a very tough spot for Brady here. Doesn't
Yeah,
have a lot going on. This is to me an indication of how powerful Wrath of the Skies is. It's not drawn, it has not been cast, but it is warped the way that Brady has to sideboard with his affinity deck to play a bunch of these reactive cards, and that's part of the reason why you see this very slow, kind of awkward, clunky draw from the affinity deck because it's filled with these reactive cards, and
oh,
it's
hitting a
really hurt Brady's chances here.
Ragavan hitting a Galvanic Blast means that this Mox Opal, if Asha chooses to remove the drone, is just so far away from producing mana. And we do
That
see
looks
that
like
come
a
down.
galvanic discharge being cast.
The blast from the Ragavan hit, yeah.
And this is just one of those spots. Asher with a consign, a Felia in hand. This is just a. We see the power of Ragavan across a bunch of decks, a bunch of matchups. It just gets value. It makes the mana to
Oh,
pay for the Metallic Rebuke. It
Fiery
got the
Islet,
removal spell.
yeah. And I would like to note, with Asha having a Felia in hand, that Metallic Rebuke did prevent the Felia from getting down a turn before, so it was smart because once that Solitude resolved, Brady would not have had the ability to cast Metallic Rebuke at all, and so making it do something rather than nothing, even though it's like, well, why did he cast it just to destroy a treasure? It was actually doing a lot more than that, and not doing anything else.
It's doing a lot more, but it doesn't look like it's doing enough here. Asha is just continuing to snowball with these powerful Modern Horizons threats that have kind of just come to make up this Jeskai Blink deck that is, there's a reason it's the number one most played deck in the format. It does some powerful things, including that one. That is incredible.
Yep. Quantum Riddler being established, Ragavan hitting in 4 damage. Weapons manufacturing is on the board, but Brady doesn't have only 2 cards in hand and facing down so much, even if he can sacrifice the munition. First of all, cast some artifacts, then sacrifice them he would need to, rather than, going at Ash's life total as weapons manufacturing often does, would need to go after the Ragavan and the Felia and the Quantum Riddler, and that's just too much.
It looks like Brady's sitting with a pile of counter spells in hand, and I would guess that game is over in short order. Back to the main feature match, game 3 between these two. Another real. This is the same line from
Oh, I
Theo,
love it. We love the
playing
theme.
around the dispute. That's that. These are the small edges that change, and we can see that Joseph is mauled to 5,
Oh,
which is
wow.
we see not a
Oh,
recipe for success with the Blink deck, especially in these matchups that Quantum Riddler is definitely not guaranteed to resolve.
I would have liked the technically optimal play is for Theo to allow the Surveil to resolve before casting the Ice Fang, but with 11 minutes on the clock, I think you just want to make sure the game progresses as fast as possible in his spot.
Sacrificing some technical optimality for efficiency, nothing wrong with that. And Theo is looking in a good spot. Joseph's I saw Fable, saw some good cards in hand, so it's definitely not over. And Theo hasn't had the most powerful proactive starts of birthing ritual plus
Well,
creatures, so
we don't
it's
know.
definitely not over.
He could have all that and just be choosing not to go for it because his hand is set up so well to react. It could be endurance, it could be a cancel here, and then he would untap and play the birthing ritual where it would be much more powerful. Wow, sync cast on the Quantum Riddler to deny a land. That is impressive. He must have sensed that Joseph was going to miss the land drop.
Felt that if you have the land, you'd always play it before the Quantum Riddler, especially in the face of both players are showing so many mystical disputes. Having that 1 mana up is such a powerful signal, and Theo makes an excellent read in going for that sync play. But again, it seems like there's a birthing ritual, but Theo is playing this unbelievably patiently. I love to see it.
Yeah, Joseph, if he doesn't find that land, needs to cast tap out again right now or be going to discard.
Looks like some unimpressive plays that are Joseph just passes, doesn't want to get the Quantum Riddler subtletyed and tries to just make Theo waste some mana, but it's not looking great.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah,
can.
that's not where you want to
Wow.
be. Consign the endurance trigger
I mean, that
without
one
even a
is basically
flage.
going to discard. But
Yeah.
Joseph does have a flage in hand, and so he's looking ahead to how this game's going to go and says, okay, well, I would rather have these cards in the graveyard, and Consign was maybe the one he would have discarded anyway. So it's actually a fairly good use of the card, but that's looking at it the most optimistic possible way. This is a rough spot for Joseph.
Yeah, it is just I do like the play of not trying to go with the Quantum Riddler into the kind of almost face up subtlety, but it does feel just now that things are slipping away very
And Theo
quickly.
continues to put on the squeeze. No birthing ritual, end step subtlety. This is, yeah. I mean, Theo is a master of these blue creature flash decks. He won a regional championship in Toronto with a blue white spirits deck in Pioneer. He's played blue tempo decks for a long time, and he plays them very well. And he's playing this Simic Birthing Ritual deck like one in this spot.
And is there maybe an ephemerate in Joseph's hand, something to get some tempo back? It doesn't seem that way.
There is not, but Theo doesn't know that, and so he might be tempted to subtlety this solitude just to play around the ephemerate, but he doesn't and is rewarded for that because I think subtlety on the solitude would not have been a good use of his cards, except if there was ephemerate.
Well,
Then it would have
actually,
been, but he doesn't
Theo
know.
does know that there is no ephemerate because Joseph is not playing any ephemerates in his 75.
Oh, okay. Well, yes,
There we
that's
go.
a
That's the
well,
cost is playing these all these March of Otherworldly Lights is something's got to give, and in this case, it's the powerful like way to get back in the game of ephemerate is just not available to Joseph.
yes, of course, and that is that makes a lot of sense. A little commentary moment, not to notice that, but for consigned to memory in Joseph's main deck and no ephemerates, that was honestly one of the weaknesses of the Jeskai deck. Before, in my opinion, is it played so many of these excellent, high quality reactive and proactive cards, and then you just had ephemerate, which didn't, stood out as kind of an individually weak card that really needed some specific things to go right, and it doesn't have the power of Felia, where, like we saw in the previous game, Felia just attack without even playing anything to target, and then removing blockers in the late game, and Ephemerate doesn't do that. So it's yeah, interesting decision from Joseph to not play any, but it makes a lot of sense. I can see why he was thinking that.
At the end of the day, this match is not looking great for Joseph, but he is 6-0. Things have
Yeah.
clearly been going right for him in this deck construction, and we see this endurance is finally not getting consigned. The cards will be put back to the bottom of his library, but it's looking to be the land finally comes off the top, but it does feel like it might be too little, too late in the face of this birthing ritual.
Well, I will never underestimate a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I have absolute belief in its ability to turn around from any spot. But yeah, if Theo maybe he used it up all his bad luck off the ritual in the last game, if he hits now, it will be quite tough.
Yeah, and it looks like there's maybe five, maybe not the full 6 cards in the graveyard, just 5, which is I guess Joseph's saving grace. Theo has an Oculus in hand that is not castable,
True, but
but
he has a subtlety, so he might just prefer to be holding up all of these spells anyway, based on
yeah,
how
and it's just
patiently he's been playing all the games before. Draw 2
happy to
more
just draw
cards. Wow.
you.
Unfortunately for Theo, it does look like the Shaman will be able to get in safely. Mana is exactly what Joseph needs. Being stuck on lands, it's going to be tapping a lot of mana on each of his turns. So the Shaman going to be very helpful at getting him back. And if it forces Theo to flash in a subtlety to try and block with no target, then that could be a way that he could turn it around. But no land hit off the Fable draw, and so it might be difficult to recover.
Yeah, that's tough. Another two loots, no land.
2/3 drops
You
drawn.
just feel like you need lands plus cheap cards to make up the tempo that you're just behind in the spot, and drawing additional redundant 3 drops does not seem to be the way back into it. Even with this treasure, you get to cast a Fable or a Teferi plus a 1 mana spell. That's does not feel like a recipe for a win in the face of what of Theo just drawing another 2 cards a turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Mystical Dispute in hand for Theo also, so he seems covered against a lot of different lines. And Subtlety coming down for this, 1 mana up, and even if Joseph had a dispute, it would promptly get disputed back.
Gets to discharge the subtlety for something, but it does feel that Theo is put, and that is the handshake. Put him in the
Wow.
squeeze.
Theo Jacques Griffin up to 7-0 with Simic Birthing Ritual. He's been here before, but still an impressive start from the kid from Montreal.